Evening, and welcome to tonight's Master Gardener program, Growing a Better Garden. I'm Dina Henshin, Head of Adult Services at Percival Library, and your host tonight. Please feel free to send me your comments and questions during the program by using the chat feature, and I will relay them during and at the end of the program. Jennifer Lumley is a Virginia Master Naturalist with a particular interest in native plants and the ecosystems that support them. She has been volunteering for the last 7 years as an Audubon at-home ambassador with the Wildlife Sanctuary Program that is administered locally by Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. Jennifer's love for Loudoun County is based in the beauty of its landscapes, which she moved here to paint. Her work as a Virginia Master Naturalist is aimed at helping to preserve that beauty. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, and welcome to everybody who is joining us this evening. My presentation tonight is really the result of my having volunteered in the Audubon at Home program for the last 7 years, because I'm often in that capacity called on to make recommendations for landowners for different native plants that will do well in their properties. And so when I'm choosing plants for my own garden, I don't mind making mistakes, but if I'm working to make recommendations for other people, it's really important to me that those plants work well for those people, especially in this program where folks are just starting out with native plants often, and we want to encourage them to do more with native plants. And if I give them suggestions that don't work at the outset, that has the potential to be really discouraging for them. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight are the steps that I go through to try to get a good match between the habitat that I'm working with and the plants that I'm suggesting for people. So for some reason I'm not advancing to the next slide. There we go. Here's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Let me just move this so that I can see. I'll spend the first half of the program talking about these things, and then I'll spend 15 or 20 minutes actually going over some tools in real time for you so that you can see how they work. And we will talk about the pH, soil acidity. We're going to discuss a little bit being mindful of the habitats that plants occur in naturally and how to find that information. We'll talk about drainage. We're going to zoom out a little bit to look at ecoregions. And we'll talk a bit at the end about aspect and slope, and then move into the online and app tools that I like to use. And this is a photograph that was taken at the Virginia State Arboretum of hollow Joe pieweed. Why my slides are not advancing. There we go. So I did want to just say that because I work with native plants, this presentation is really focused on that. And if you work with introduced species, some of the tools that I'm going to be showing you may not be as useful for you, but the concepts I'm going to talk about apply broadly to plants in general. And this is a photograph of the steps next to my yard, and the ground cover that you're seeing there is a plant called green and gold, which is really lovely. It spreads very rapidly and has a yellow daisy-like flower in the spring. So we've all been in the position where we get excited at a plant. We may have seen it at a nursery. We purchase it, we bring it home, and it doesn't do well, or maybe it even dies. And my goal is to reduce those errors. I don't think it's possible to eliminate them, and to learn more about the larger ecosystem in that process. So these are bearded beggar ticks, and they were growing over in Middleburg in the Mickey Gordon Park, where I like to walk my dog. So I know that you all are very familiar with checking USDA hardiness zones, looking at sun and watering needs. And those are the three things that most gardeners are going to look at when they're choosing plants. And that's going to be the information that's usually listed on labels in nurseries as well. And in some instances, that's really all the information that you need. And those plants may perform well if you just take those things into consideration. But it's a lot safer to also look at a few other things by doing a little bit of research. And these are Virginia bluebells over at Cool Spring Battlefield, and they are just getting ready to burst into bloom right now. So if you have a chance to get over there and look at them, it's the perfect time of year to do that. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about pH. And I think this is often overlooked, except for in cases where you have really, where plants are situated on the far extremes of the pH scale, like azaleas or maybe blueberries. And people are usually familiar with that. But with other plants, I think we don't pay as much attention to it as we could. So I used to think about pH as being, you have the pH range that a plant likes. And I used to think of that as being that plant's pH requirement. But the way I think about it now is more that that plant is going to compete well within that range. So it's just a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. And this sumac here, smooth sumac, is growing over in Gilbert's Corner Regional Park in Leesburg, where they have just beautiful stands of sumac. If you're a sumac lover, it's a really nice place to visit. So this is a photograph of wild bergamot, and it came from Sue Russell's gardener. She's a master from her garden. She's a master gardener that I often pair up with when I do site visits for the Audubon at Home program. And I also have that plant in my yard, but if I look at its pH range, I find that it's not really that well suited for my yard. And the way that I know this is by using a site called the Virginia Plant Atlas, which I usually check on my phone as an app. And this is what it looks like. So if you go to vaplantatlas.org, you'll see a search bar here. You can search either under the scientific name or the common name. And you just type in the plant's name and it's going to bring up information that looks like this. You'll also get a map that I will show you later when we look at this live. But down here, it's going to list the habitat for that plant. And you'll notice down here that it says this plant usually occurs on moderately to strongly base-rich soils. And the soil in my garden is acidic. So when I see that description in here, and I come across it pretty often, I know that that is a plant that I am not going to choose to plant or recommend to someone who has acidic soil. Now, it is not going to die necessarily in my yard. It comes back every year, but it never thrives because it just doesn't have the pH that it needs. So, and I have tried it in many different spots in my yard, and it just performs the same way in all of them. So my next slide says, how do I know if my yard has alkaline, neutral, or acidic soil? And as master gardeners, I know that you are familiar with the county extension office's soil tests for determining that. But I wanted to suggest that it can be helpful to use a handheld pH meter also as another option for determining the pH of your soils. And what I like about this is that you can have a lot of variability in pH, even within the same garden bed. And it's nice to be able to get those readings from one spot to the next. And this is yellow jewelweed that was growing over in Shenandoah Springs Wildlife Management Area. So this is the handheld soil tester that I have. I'm not recommending this one. I'm just putting it here so that you can see what these tools look like if you've never seen one. And all you do with this device is you just push it into the earth until it hits the until you have buried the silver part at the bottom, and within 3 minutes you have your pH number there on the gauge that's on the top of it. And the only fiddly bit about this tool is that it does require some moisture in the soil. So if the weather has been very dry, you might need to water the area you're going to test an hour or so before you do the test. And also it requires that you use a special kind of paper that you have to buy in order to clean the tip between each test. And that paper is kind of expensive, but it lasts for a long time. So they're really pretty minor downsides. So when you think about pH, I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I find it really interesting to zoom out and think of it within the larger geological context. And so this is a map that shows the ecoregions that the EPA has divided the country into. And each one of those ecoregions shares particular characteristics. And it can be really interesting to read a little bit about them. So my property is right here in this sort of curry-colored area, backing up against the Blue Ridge, which is the green right here. And that is the Piedmont uplands. And you can see, so in Loudoun County, so Loudoun County is right around here, there are a number of different ecoregions in our area. And in order to find out which ecoregion your property is situated in, you can use the ecoregion locator tool that Bee Plant offers on their website. And it's very simple to use. You just type in your address right here, hit search, and it is going to bring up a map. It looks like this. This is my property right here. You click on the map and it's going to bring up a hierarchical listing of ecoregion names, and each one of those is going to be a hyperlink to a description of that ecoregion. So if we look at the Piedmont uplands, it tells you that the topography of that area consists of rounded hills, low ridges, irregular plains, and narrow valleys, all underlain by metamorphic rock. So metamorphic rocks, you may remember from your science classes in high school, are rocks that have been transformed by high temperatures and high pressure into new types of rock. And they're pretty uncommon at the Earth's surface. So they usually don't contribute greatly to forming soils. And they're also very hard, so they weather very slowly. But if we move back, so if we go back here, if we jump over from the Piedmont uplands to this area here, just over the Shenandoah, we find ourselves in the northern limestone dolomite valleys. And in this region, it's going to tell us, where is it? The underlying bedrock is mostly the soluble and calcium-rich limestone and dolomite. So in that case, those kinds of rocks are softer and more soluble, and they are likely to influence the pH and make the soil more alkaline. So you can learn things about the soil by looking at the rocks from which it is being weathered in these descriptions. And doing that starts to put your own land within a larger context that can just be really interesting. So putting aside pH now, drainage is the second thing that I wanted to discuss, and it is related to geology, and it's affected by a lot of different things. It can be affected by the distance to groundwater beneath the soil, or it can be affected by barriers that exist in the soil between the top of the soil and that groundwater. And it's also influenced by things like slopes and the way a slope is facing. So this is a photograph, again, from Mickey Gordon Park. That's New York ironweed, if you're not familiar with that. Lovely, lovely plant. And the best way that I know of getting a handle on the conditions that affect drainage on your land is to use Loudoun County's wonderful mapping tool, which you see here, their WebLogis tool, and it's going to tell you a lot about the drainage that's going to occur on your land. So when you search, you can use that tool to search for any Loudoun County property. And when you do that, this is my property right here. And you can select for different information. So in this screenshot, I've selected for soils. And what you're seeing, these brown divisions here are showing you, they're mapping out different soil types. So the 2A, the 29C, 20D, the A, the C, and the D, that's telling you how much of a slope there is. And then the other number refers to a category of soils that have been mapped by the USDA. And if you click on them, you can bring up descriptions of those soils that are pretty interesting. In this screenshot, I've selected for soil drains. This is a soil drain coming down through here, this kind of bluish green line feeding into this stream. And I've also selected floodplains, which are shown in blue here, and hydric soil, which is shown in green. And those distinctions are pretty useful. For instance, if I were choosing plants for the area that includes the floodplain, I could choose rain garden plants that would tolerate both the flooding and the dry spells. But if I were planting in this area where the soil is saturated for a good part of the year, I would really need wetland plants for that area. So it's pretty useful information. It also gives you a topography box that you can check, and that will tell you, you can look at which way your slope is facing that way. You can see how steep it is. So there's a lot in there to look at. So moving on to slopes. And I was surprised when I did a little bit of digging at how incredibly influential it is to have a slope facing one way versus another way. So slopes that face, and this really is more, this may not be directly useful to you in selecting plants, but it's really interesting for understanding the degree to which plants and soil are and topography are interacting. So north and east facing slopes are going to be cooler and wetter. The pH is going to be higher. They're going to have more biomass. They'll have fewer trunks when you have a forested area because the growth is quicker, and with that quicker growth, the canopy closes more quickly and prevents the saplings that are trying to compete for light to grow up. You get more rapid decomposition because of the moisture, more organic matter, higher nutrient concentrations, and you get faster growth and, as I was saying, faster reduction in stem numbers and a faster increase in stem diameter on those slopes. So pretty big influence there. And this is a stand of yellow poplars on the drive into Bear's Den in Clarks County. So the opposite of that are west and south facing slopes, which do tend to be hotter and drier. My yard is on a western facing slope. You get less organic matter. The soils tend to be more acidic with more phosphorus. You get more stems per acre because of what we were discussing before. And plants on western facing slopes tend to concentrate more on the growth below the ground in order to maximize the nutrients and water that they can absorb. Photosynthesis is depressed in reaction to the higher transpiration, and you end up with a thicker, drier leaf flare that decomposes more slowly and provides a less favorable environment for soil, flora, and fauna. And often you find these slopes have a high number of oak trees, and those leaves, the oak trees, naturally decompose more slowly because of the tannin in them. So the last thing I wanted to describe is the effect that elevation has on pH. And this is something that I noticed when I was hiking at Bear's Den, which is, it's a hike that goes up the side of a mountain. And I noticed that at the bottom of the mountain and maybe up 2/3 of the slope, I was seeing plant communities that prefer more alkaline soils. And then as I got higher up, the communities changed over to plants that preferred acidic environments. And I was really curious about that because I had looked at the ecoregion and knew that the underlying rock was the same at both elevations. And I wondered what was changing that pH. What was happening that was making that difference? And so I researched it on my own and didn't get very far, and eventually contacted a friend who is a geologist, and he did some research on it for me. And this is what he found, that you get slower decomposition of organic matter at the upper elevations, and more precipitation and soil permeability, which increases, and this was one of the main reasons. It increases the leaching of basic elements out of the soil. So it leaches those more alkaline elements out at the same time that it is drawing, the mechanical weathering draws the finer materials down slope, so that you end up with sandy and gravelly slopes at the top with that tend to be more acidic, and clay soils lower down that tend to be more alkaline. You also have decreased temperatures up high, which slow down microbial activity, lead to reduced rates of mineralization and nutrient cycling. So there's really, so elevation has a really substantial impact on plant communities. And I just found that really interesting. So I'm sharing it with you, even though it doesn't have a lot of practical application probably. So to summarize, let's checking my time. Good, right on time. To summarize, what I do when I am making plant recommendations is first, I really evaluate the site carefully. I check the ecoregion. I look at the underlying rock. I look at the elevation, check slope. What direction is that slope facing if it is a sloping property? And I do pH testing. I look up the soils and I use Loudoun's mapping tool to check drainage and the likely moisture, and of course take into account the amount of sun. And then once I've done that, I evaluate the plant and just see how closely it matches those conditions. And I also, when I'm out and about and I'm looking at plants, plants that I might consider later for people's gardens, I'm looking at the conditions that I observe them in, under which conditions am I seeing them do well? And I always believe that a plant that's healthy and thriving is going to be more attractive in a garden than maybe a showier plant that is struggling to do well. So this is wild strawberry in my yard that I use as ground cover, and it does so nicely for me. It's so happy in those conditions, and it just is a real pleasure for me because of that. So that is the end of the first part of the presentation. And now I'd like to just go ahead and give you a little bit of a demonstration of the tools I've been talking about in real time so that you can sort of see better how they work. So if we look at the Digital Atlas of Virginia first, click into that. Here's that page that you saw before. And here's the search bar. And what I'd like to show you is the difference between plants that have very, very, very specific needs and plants that have slightly more general ones. So I want to look first at blue cohosh, and I'm going to type in the scientific name here. Because it is really particular about habitat. So here's what you're going to get. You get this map, and this is Loudoun County right here. And it's nice if you just hover over these counties, it'll tell you what county it is. So if you're not in Loudoun, you can situate yourself. The red dot shows that this plant is native to Loudoun County, and you get a nice sequence of photographs over here showing the plant. And then down, if you scroll, it's going to show you habitat. And get this out of the way. If you look at this description, rich mesic cove and slope forests. So a cove forest is a forest that has a kind of concave shape to it. And so fertile, well-drained floodplain forests. And it is generally restricted to mesic, sheltered, so moist, mesic, sheltered, that's like the cove forest, stream fronting slopes and floodplains, over mafic, and that means rocks that are rich in magnesium and iron, or calcareous rocks containing calcium carbonate. So that's quite a list of restrictions, It's not just slopes, it's particular kinds of slopes. It's slopes with a particular moisture level. They have to be protected. They're generally only slopes that give into streams at the bottom, and they're over particular kinds of rocks. So honestly, that is a plant, although I love that plant, that it's unlikely I would ever recommend to someone in an Audubon at home report because it's just so specific, the habitat that it prefers. So if we skip from that to a slightly less demanding plant, we look at Virginia spiderwort. Which is right here. Again, it's native to Loudoun County. So that plant occurs naturally in well-drained floodplain forests, mesic to dry. So you're getting a little bit of floodplain forest as well as upland forests, mesic to dry, and rocky woodlands and outcrops, but still usually in moderately to strongly base-rich soils. So,
Jennifer?
yes.
I'm sorry, it looks like your slideshow might have gotten stuck on a quick look at Digital Atlas.
Oh, no. So
I apologize, it's my...
is it not going to switch into other screens?
Are they websites?
Yes.
I am not, maybe not.
Oh,
I guess we didn't test that out. Maybe we should have.
so is it, okay, well, is there any way to switch the screen that I'm sharing to a
Sure.
different
I mean, you
screen?
can, I believe if you would have to share your screen.
So let me just go back. Let me navigate back to where I was. So escape from this. Okay, so then here I am, and I'm in a different screen. I'm looking for somewhere where I would share it. Share. There we go. Share my webinar window, share content, or share web browser. How about
Yeah,
web
that would
browser?
probably, so you might have to do that for for the different apps,
Okay.
and then go back to your slideshow.
Okay. So
I apologize. I looked down for a minute and then I missed that it hadn't been
oops.
going.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't think of that was going to be a problem. So let me just find that Virginia plant atlas. There we go. Okay, so
There we go. Now we can.
now you
So
can
yeah,
see that.
if you yeah, so you're in your web browser now. You should be able to go to the different websites, and then you can go back to your PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just getting us back to the Virginia spiderwort. I'm sorry about that.
No,
That
no,
must
no.
have
It was my
been.
fault. I should have caught it quicker.
So hopefully everyone can see this now. So this is what I was saying before. That it shows that the plant is native to Loudoun up here in the map. And then this is the habitat description down here towards the bottom, where it gives us that description of it occurring in floodplain forests, but says that it is usually in moderately to strongly base-rich soils. So again, that usually in moderately to strongly base-rich soils, that's a condition that is going to be rare among the people I'm recommending plants for. So that's going to eliminate that plant for me from most of the people that I would write a site report for. So the last one I wanted to look up for you is the Virginia strawberry, because it is a much easier, a much more, much less picky plant. So if you look at the habitat description there, it's mesic to dry upland forests, woodlands, and well-drained alluvial forests, but more characteristic of old fields, clearings, meadows, pastures, roadsides, and other open disturbed habitats. You'll notice there's nothing there about it occurring on particular kinds of rock, and it's a pretty broad set of habitat descriptions. So this is the kind of description that I look for when I make a recommendation for somebody else. Okay, so that is the Virginia Plant Atlas. And next, we wanted to go to have a look at bee plant. I just have to find it here. I was counting on having, there it is. There we go. So we had seen this page before, and if I type in my address, and it does save addresses, so I'm just going to select it and hit search. And there I am. And so I just click on the map, it drops a pin, and then here are those hyperlinked descriptions of the different ecoregions for you that we looked at before. And I just wanted to show you one thing at the level of Piedmont uplands. They don't have this feature, but if you go up one to a slightly larger category, to the northern Piedmont, which includes the Piedmont uplands. So here are the Piedmont uplands right there within that larger northern Piedmont area that they're describing. And if you scroll down, it'll have the description, but it also lists, you can also do searches for native plants within that region, which is kind of nice. You can look to see if a plant is native to that specific region. And you can use that search tool in other ways. You can use it if I wanted, for instance, to check to see which species of pine are native to that region. I can put in Pinus and search the region, and it's going to bring up a list for me of all of the pines. It's going to include some strange things in that list because I'm not sure why, but it will include all the different kinds of pine that are native to that region, which, you know, for what it's worth, if you find that helpful or interesting, just wanted to show you that that was there. And then I think the most useful tool for all of us is really Loudoun County's mapping tool, which is right here. And it's going to have just a, you need to click through this disclaimer to open up the site. It shows you Loudoun County there with the dotted outline, and you can just go to search over here, go to find address, you can type your address in. And as you put the number in, it's going to bring up your choices. So I'm just going to click Airmont Road and then locate that on the map. So here it is. That's the address. And if I go here and I hit identify, go to land records and parcel and click on it. Now I have the outlines of the parcel. And please don't be overwhelmed by my clicking through this tool. There is a link in the resource pages to a tutorial on how to use it that will walk you through all these steps more slowly so that you can use it if you're interested in this tool. One kind of nice thing is you can click on the PIN number and you can go over here to aerial photos, and that will allow you to see your property from above and to rotate it. So you can see it from all sides, move it around. And so that's kind of a nice feature. And it has, you can select a date. So it shows you those photographs from sometimes pretty far back. So that's kind of interesting, but I'm digressing. So if you look at the map feature and you click on environmental and open up that drop-down list, here is the soils that I was talking about before. And if you want a description of those soils, go back to identify and environmental soils. And then if you click and you click on see code description, here's what it's going to give you. Just ignore all of this stuff. So it was 29C. just scroll down. 29C, Eubanks, loam, stony. C means that you have a slope of 7 to 15%. And here's your description. Tells you it's very deep, well-drained, yellowish red to red loamy soil on undulating sloping uplands, developed in residuum weathered from mixed gneiss, metadiabase, and other metamorphosed granitic rocks. Tells you the depth to hard bedrock, and it this information is talking about whether there's potential for septic tank drainage fields. And then the information to the right is a designation, an agricultural designation, and the land use capability class. But I really use it just for looking at the soils. And what's interesting in the soils is that it will tell you if there are things like perched water tables, you know, where your drainage is going to be influenced by some sort of barrier between the soil and your normal water table. So that's probably the most useful thing about the soils there. And if we look at, let me just get my plot back here. For some reason, when you bring up those soil descriptions, you lose the outline of the plot. So if here's the topography I was talking about, that tells you the slope down here and the elevation, and then the soil drain right there, floodplains, and the hydric soils. And you can zoom in and out and look at the larger picture. You know, you can see your neighbor's properties and where their hydric soil might be located. So pretty interesting. And the only last thing I wanted to talk to you about was Soil Web. Which I use on my phone. There's an app you can get for your phone, and it's another way of looking at soils. So you can search for property here too. And here we have, there's that 29C soil again. And they have, if you click on it, they're going to give you slightly different information. So they're telling you it's the same soil that's listed on Loudoun County's mapping, but they give you a little bit of a different interface. So they'll give you a soil sketch that shows you the different horizons of the soils. And you can click on clay, for instance, to get what percentage of clay is in the soil at the different horizons, or what percentage of sand. Give you a little better understanding of your soil. And they also have a pH button, which I have found doesn't really correspond quite to the pH that I get when I take readings. But it is kind of interesting because, for instance, my soil shows that the pH is steady down through all of the layers of soils at every depth. But some soils that I look up show that pH changes depending on how deep you go. So if you want to know, and really I use this tool on my phone when I'm out and about walking around and I'm somewhere and I'm curious about the soil, and you just push a button and it tells you what the soil is under your feet, which is kind of cool. So if you have an interest in soils, that might be something that would be fun for you. Or maybe it's just really one step further than you ever wanted to go. So now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to see if I can share that. Share. Do you have any idea, Dina, on how to get it back? It's
Um,
just showing that I'm sharing.
can you go back to the bottom and hit share? You see the button on the bottom, the share button?
No. Um, that's strange. There we go. Okay, wait. Here we go. I got it now. Share my share content or share my webinar window. Here we go. Okay, it's going to give me a choice. Here we go. All right. So,
Okay, we're back to your PowerPoint. You just have to get it to your right slide.
all right. So this is where we want to be. Current slide. There we go. Okay. I wanted to also recommend this book, which is it's The Gardener's Guide to Prairie Plants. It's a new book. It just came out. And that title is a little bit misleading because it covers a lot of the plants that are native to Loudoun County, a lot of the perennials and grasses. And what I like about it is that it has a whole section in the back with charts. And those charts cover things like pH ranges, the root type, the soil texture, the aggressiveness and the manner of spread, deer palatability. It's really got a nice listing of features of plants. So check that out. And then it's not wanting to move. There we go. And then these are the resources that I think Dina is going to send out to you. So, or maybe she already has sent them out to you. This is the YouTube video for learning to use WebLogis right there. That's the WebLogis link. These are those other sites we visited. This is the book I just discussed. This is that book. If you're interested in that book, but don't necessarily want to buy it right away, you can take a look at a video about it that Doug Tallamy posted where the authors go over the book's content. And so I've included a link to that. And this is the pH tester. And then there's a link to more information about slopes and also to the site where you can download that ecoregions map if you are interested. And another book that I really liked called Garden Revolution that you may or may not be familiar with that talks a lot about interplanting plants so that their root systems occupy every niche in a garden in order to prevent as a way of keeping invasives at bay, and using that principle along with the guide to prairie plants that helps you know what kind of roots plants actually have is a nice combination. So, and these are just ostrich ferns in my garden. And thank you so much for listening to all of that. I hope some of it might have been helpful to you. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them.
I'm just checking here. We've got several comments. Thank you so much. Very interesting and informative. Thank you so much. The websites were fantastic. Great pictures. Get into delving into all of the soil content and the acidity and the different apps that, I mean, like delving down into the more like sciencey part of growing plants. Jennifer, did you hear me?
I'm sorry. So was there a question in what you were saying?
Yeah, how did you get interested in delving down into like the soil and the acidity and like, is that just a culmination of being interested in plants and how they grow and just did you kind of delved into it on your own or did something pique your interest?
It really has been through my my work with native plants, moving after I did my Virginia Master Naturalist training. I've always loved plants. I've been an avid gardener for 40 years, and I just love plants. And um, after I did that training and started working with Audubon at Home program, I changed my own garden over from mostly non-natives to almost exclusively natives. So that was a huge undertaking, and that, along with having that responsibility for making recommendations to other people, really made me want to better understand um, plants in detail. So
Very nice.
it's really those two
Um,
things.
Somebody said, I knew about one or two of the tools you introduced. I can't wait to explore the ones new to me. So that's exciting. Let's see. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much. The websites are insightful. Thank you. You got lots of thank yous, and that people are very interested in the new apps. Um, Somebody asked if we needed to supply the email for the resource attachment. I put my email in the chat. I'm going to put it again here. If anybody wants the resource page, I will email it to you. If you're part of the Master Gardener group, it will be sent out to the Master Gardener group. So feel free to email me if you're not part of the Master Gardener group. Here's another question for you, Jennifer. How does WebLogis know the specific soil composition of one's yard?
It's through the USDA mapping. So there are maps for the whole country of the soil types, and I think they were done there. If you go on that site, there's information, and that long page that I showed where at the bottom it has that chart that describes the soils. There's a lot of information at the top of that page about where that soil information comes from, who did the mapping, and when the mapping was done. So if you just look in that page, and you can figure out how to get to that page using the tutorial that I posted, that will give you a lot more information about that.
Dean says, thanks, Jennifer, for the inspiration. You can digress with us anytime. I have a question. What is your favorite plant in your yard?
Oh, my favorite plant in my yard. Oh, that's a really hard question. Um, well, one of one of the plants that I really love that was given to me by the person who was leading the Audubon at Home program um, when I first joined is a 10-petaled sunflower, and it's wonderful for its. Oh, you can kind of see it. It's over here in the back of this bed. You sort of see a massive green back here. That's it. She gave me one plant, and it grew into, it's probably a 5-foot square area now that's nothing but that plant. It just drowns out absolutely everything in its path, and just covers itself in wonderful yellow flowers, attracts a lot of pollinators, and is just really carefree and easy. So I really love that plant. I love those super aggressive plants. Not everyone feels that way. And if you have a small yard, you probably definitely don't feel that way. But I have a lot of space to cover. So it's nice for me.
Somebody asked if a recording of the lecture is going to be available, and yes, I've been recording this, and we will get it posted on the Loudoun County Public Library's YouTube channel, so be on the lookout for that. And there actually is a whole folder full of gardening or Master Gardener related programs on our YouTube page, so you can access other programs that we've done as well. Let me see if there's any other. Oh, yep, there's a couple more questions. When a property has been built on, how much of original soil profiles will still be present?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. And um, It's one that I can't answer. Certainly the space, the space around your house is definitely iffy from that point of view. And if you live in a development where houses are close together, probably that information is less useful to you. It's probably more applicable in more rural settings because there's been a little bit less earth removal in those areas. That's a great question.
Um, Somebody said you didn't talk much about pests. I'm thinking of deer. Do you have to filter your recommendations for clients to avoid those that deer eat?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I definitely filter for that. Yeah. Yeah. So, and one way of doing it, and we have a local nursery in Hamilton, Watermark Woods, that sells native plants, and because I buy my plants locally, and because I want the recommendations that I give to other people to be available locally, I will often use her database search tool first to search for plants. And she has on that kind of as a first screening of plants. And she has you can select for deer palatability in that search tool. So you can kind of get a sense of what plants are available locally that are less palatable to deer as a first pass, and then look into them further using some of these other tools. That's what I do.
Somebody commented, I have found that growing native plants has taken more effort than anticipated. Is that often the case?
I I don't think so. I mean, they're generally more adapted to the environment and do better with less care than introduced species. So it certainly that was not my experience. Um, so it may it may be a question of um, just doing a little bit more research about habitat in that case, because no, I have not found that to be true.
Okay. He said, I've tried to get green and gold started in my yard, but the deer keep eating it. Do you have that? Do you have this
Oh,
issue?
they don't eat it for me. And I certainly have a lot of deer and they eat a lot of other things. They don't eat it, but I think, with deer, it's based on what you have available.
Yeah,
If I have other things that are keeping them happy, maybe they're not eating that.
that are tastier.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's it. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was a wonderful
Oh,
presentation. We
well, thank
appreciate
you,
it.
everybody, for participating, and happy gardening.